Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this section, the Unlocking PSP. Today, we will present Domain 1, Task 5. With Domain 1, Task 5, we complete the first section that it was the physical security assessment. Next week, I think it will be the more interesting part, at least for me, in this study group. I think that next week we will start the design and integration of physical security systems. But in the other hand, I want to let you know that based on our initial plan, we are a little bit behind schedule. And we try to I think that I prepared a tool for you to help us to understand how we can handle this study group in a better way. I will start the presentation. Alan, thank you again for being with us. He will start the presentation, and maybe before we go into the questions, it's a 5-6 question on that pool that it will help us to understand what is most important for you. It's most important for you, the question is most important for you to discuss the presentation. What will be the better way to improve our timing in this study group? Say that, well, welcome, Alan. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Nelson. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is well. As Nelson said, this will finish off Domain 1. This is Domain 1 Task 5, which basically shows us how to perform a risk analysis to develop countermeasures. So the goal of this Domain 1 Task 5, and at the end of this presentation, you should have a clear idea of how to enhance the security of your organization in a real-world context. So we'll be looking at risk analysis methods, loss event profiles, which we'll discuss, and choose suitable countermeasures while weighing costs and benefits of that. So let's get started. So let's go back. We already discussed risk, threats, vulnerabilities. We discussed that previously. So again, we're going to drill down a little more into this. It's very, very important to understand this. Risk is the likelihood of a threat exploiting a vulnerability to harm an asset. That's something that is very, very important. The core risk formula to bring all those three variables together, threat, vulnerability, and risk. Risk equals threat multiplied by vulnerability multiplied by consequence. So how likely is it that a threat can find a way in? How vulnerable is your asset? And what happens if the worst occurs? So threat is times multiplied by vulnerability multiplied by consequence. Again, this is the core risk formula. There's an example, for instance, a data center may face a threat of a server room fire. And if it has an outdated fire suppression system, that's the vulnerability. The consequence, loss of critical customer data, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. So that is basically the idea of risk and how it fits in with threat, vulnerability, and consequence. And we spoke about assets, these previous four tasks. An asset, just so we remember, could be people, property, information, or systems of value. They could be tangible or intangible. Threat is what could go wrong, source of potential harm, human, natural, or technological. And we're going to drill down into these in the following slides. A vulnerability is a weakness that makes a threat more likely to happen. And consequence is the impact if a threat occurs. So it could be a financial consequence, operational. That's what happens. The consequence is what happens if the threat occurs. Let's talk a little bit about some types of risk analysis. One that's used primarily, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Nelson, but more in the DoD world, Department of Defense world, and government installations, is design basis threat.
Yeah.
It's a structured profile of likely adversaries and attack methods. So that would include the tactics of your adversary, their techniques, their procedures, their intent. What do they want to do? Why are they doing this? Their capabilities, of course, and their history of previous attacks. And they also their target selection criteria. Why did they choose that particular target? So DBT, or design basis threat, is used also in critical infrastructure, and could be the type of things you may want to mitigate would be vehicle-borne threats, such as vehicle-borne IEDs. As mitigation such as bollards and standoff zones must be included. So that is the design basis threat, typically used critical infrastructure or even DoD or military. And the last 4 modules, we spoke about qualitative risk analysis. If you remember that, that will be subjective scoring. Quantitative risk analysis, of course, assigns a number to that. So 80% chance of happening or whatever. And then there's a hybrid risk analysis, which is a combination of qualitative and quantitative. So you could use incident trends, which are essentially qualitative, to inform the user of a loss estimate, which is, of course, quantitative in a dollar value. Another method we use is the all hazard risk assessment approach. So this is a very wide subject, of course. It takes a very wide angle on hazards. That would take into account natural disasters, including hurricanes and earthquakes, technological, including equipment failure, power loss, the grid going down, human-caused, terrorism, vandalism, insider threats. And why it matters is to help prioritize investments and create a more resilient enterprise risk plan. And it doesn't just cover actual attackers. Of course, the attacker in this case could be a natural disaster. It could be a hurricane, an earthquake, or any of these categories that we see here. So that is the idea of an all hazard approach, very wide in its scope. Common tools and techniques. One thing we use is a risk matrix. It plots the likelihood of an incident happening versus the consequence. A decision tree forecasts outcomes of different decisions. A fault tree analysis identifies the root cause of system failure. And an event tree analysis projects scenarios from a triggering event. And historical loss data uses past incidents to predict future risk. So those are common tools and techniques. One thing that I find very useful in this is the ASIS website. And I'll just bring that up for a second. So if you are a member, hopefully you are, you can look at things like, you can put maybe a search here for risk matrix just to see what comes up. And it should give you some, sorry, I mistyped that. So it gives you many good articles. Some of these are articles, they're free. Some of them are documentation, they have to pay, or they could be free if you're an ASIS member. But there are several, 385 different pages of different articles on risk matrix. Sometimes you can narrow it down even further by just putting risk matrix in quotes. Otherwise, it may look for risk and matrix at the same time. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we can try it. Yes, so this is a more probably pointed towards what we're talking about. And there's just a few articles, but very good. So the people explain their risk matrices or matrices through these various articles. So they're very, very good. And I would highly recommend you sign up on the ASIS website if you're not already, and then just do anything you're not sure of, just do a search in the search box up top. It's quite useful. So that's some common tools and techniques that we have available to us. A loss event profile, or LEP, is it's a structured record that helps you drill down on adverse events. So that would detail their frequency, their severity, the affected assets, and the consequences. So you think of it, and as an example, if a fire breaks out in a warehouse, the assets at risk, of course, would be the inventory in that warehouse, the machinery and equipment in that warehouse. The potential consequences would be life safety risks, and of course, direct financial losses, operation interruptions, and maybe legal liability. And the probability might be low, but the severity could be catastrophic for your organization. So the loss event profile documents type of event, the assets affected, the frequency of occurrence, and the consequence, qualitative plus quantitative. So that is the consequence. Loss event profiles do help prioritize mitigation by risk magnitude. Common LEP consequence categories. So the impact type is life safety. And that, of course, the example consequence would be injury or death due to violence or fire. Financial impact, theft, fraud, business interruption. Operational impact, system or supply chain disruption. Reputational impact, public trust loss, media scrutiny. And legal regulatory, of course, fines, sanctions, compliance, violations, that sort of thing. And how do you quantify consequences? Again, this looks very, this is a quantitative scale with qualitative descriptions, right? So you've got low, moderate, high, critical, catastrophic, but in a quantitative sense, you've given it a rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So low will be minor inconvenience, moderate will be some loss or disruption, high would be major loss with possible injuries, critical operational crisis, serious harm, and of course, catastrophic death, major legal or financial loss. So this is one way to quantify consequences. So let's now look at prioritizing risks, frequency versus severity. So frequency, high, consequence low, the priority level is medium. This is just an example matrix for countermeasures. High frequency, high consequence is critical, of course. A low frequency but high consequence is considered a high priority. And of course, low frequency, low consequence would be a low priority. It's interesting how high frequency, low consequence is medium, but low frequency, high consequence, of course, is a very high priority because the consequence is high. So, for instance, last weekend here in the west coast of Florida, we had a tornado, which is low probability around here. We don't get that many, but if it did happen, and it did, it would be a very high impact. Another example, shoplifting in a retail store, high probability, low to moderate impact. Another example, perhaps a disgruntled insider misusing privileged access, medium probability, but potentially severe impact. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at. Let's have a look at some countermeasure selection guidelines. Nothing, as we know, is free. Every countermeasure has a cost. Installation, maintenance, and staffing. And that's when you would have to use a cost-benefit analysis. And we'll talk about that in further modules. A cost-benefit analysis, or CBA, would ensure you're spending wisely. There's no point in spending millions of dollars to protect an asset that's worth $100. It's a single asset. So that kind of analysis will help you make sure you're spending your money wisely. A good CBA, cost-benefit analysis, weighs the cost of implementing the countermeasure against the expected loss if no action is taken. TCO, total cost of ownership, and return on investment to assess long-term value. TCO, total cost of ownership, would include things like how much is the system that you're implementing actually going to cost over the time of its service, over its lifetime. Will there be upgrade costs? Will there be replacement parts costs? That sort of thing. And non-compliance, of course. Let me just say that legal and regulatory on this matter here. Never overlook that part of it, compliance and regulatory and legal. There's things like privacy laws, fire codes, local regulations. They all must be respected. So biometric access control must comply with privacy laws in your region, if that's a thing. And video surveillance, not so much in the US, but in Europe, it requires clear signage and proper data storage policies. Audio recording is more of an issue in the US, where they can, by some state standards, they have to have signage up saying audio is being recorded. Where does loss event data come from? It comes from incident reports, real-world examples of loss, business continuity plans, mission-critical processes and scenarios, insurance claims, documented costs and coverage outcomes, threat modeling tools, and regulatory assessment. So the loss event profile will document the type of event, the assets affected, frequency of occurrence, consequence, and they also help prioritize mitigation. Just so there's a lot of acronyms here. Of course, Department of Homeland Security. CFAX is a chemical facility anti-terrorism standard. A lot of this, if you just Google these terms, you can come up with good documentation on their websites. Sometimes the documentation you have to pay for it. Other times there's enough free information you can make your way through it. And NERC is for critical infrastructure. It's the North American Electrical Reliability Corporation. It's for CIP, critical infrastructure. And it's basically a reduction of the grid's reduction of risks to the grid's reliability and security. So risk management has a life cycle. It's a continuing, evolving cycle. Again, identify, always pinpoint your threats, your vulnerabilities, and your assets. Analyze risk probability and impact. Evaluate, compare risk levels to tolerance thresholds. What are your tolerance thresholds? Treat, select controls or strategies to mitigate, transfer, or accept the risk. We'll talk about that in the next slide. That can be quite interesting. And monitor. Review and update assessments and controls regularly. This is a cycle. You're always looking at this and updating as necessary as your business needs change or your facility has changes within. Okay, on to the various risk treatment options. So there's usually questions, if I remember, it's been a long time since I took the test, but there's usually some questions on these kind of strategies. They may ask you, in a multiple choice, which are the four risk treatment options. And if you remember this, you'll be good. So number one is to avoid risk avoidance. Don't take the risk, no unnecessary risks. If it's a risk, don't take it. If it's a mitigation strategy, then you would apply physical, procedural, or technical countermeasures. Transfer basically means insurance, outsource the risk or insure against it. And accept basically means, what the heck, it's going to happen. Take no action, only when your risk is within tolerance. Before I retired, I did a bit of work in the retail side for loss prevention. And most companies in the retail trade, they do have an accepted number of loss or shrinkage, as they call it. Like, say, Levi's jeans, very popular item, but they would have a level, say, $10,000 a year is acceptable. It's not worth the money to guard against that. So they would accept that loss. So take no action only when risk is within tolerance. So those are the four strategies, and try to keep those in your head or remember them. Enterprise risk management. It's basically, the whole definition of that is a strategic approach that organizations use to identify, assess, and mitigate risks that could impact their objectives and operations. So the enterprise risk management feature is on the left. So the top-down strategy would be risk ownership begins with senior leadership and board committees. Cross-functional approach would be inputs are taken from all departments, including HR, legal, IT, and security. And the strategic approach would be risk tolerance and mitigation aligned to mission objectives. And the resilient approach, focus on recovery, business continuity, and stakeholder confidence. Security's job here is to integrate physical security into ERM, just like finance integrates risk from investments. So the security professional has to work at this level and integrate their physical security plan into your customer or your own ERM, enterprise risk management. A little bit on residual risk. Residual risk equals total risk minus the mitigation impact. So residual risk is basically the amount of risk left over or remaining after all possible risk mitigation strategies have been implemented. You'll never get 100% risk-free. So once you've done your plan, what's left over, any risks that are left over, be they small, that is residual risk. So as a security professional, we have to document remaining vulnerabilities. We have to ensure executive buy-in to accept them. That's very important. And monitor changes that might increase residual risk. That's a variable, that residual risk. It could change over time. Okay, continual risk monitoring. And threats do evolve, so must your controls. So must your controls. Good practices would be to review the incident logs and any near misses, validate the assumptions used in risk models, update the design basis threat annually or following a significant event, and incorporate lessons learned and changes in the threat landscape. The threat landscape is also ever changing. So everything here is very, it's fluid. Everything is very fluid in our business. Changes happen all the time and all of the variables that we have. So the role of a security professional. The security professional should lead and facilitate physical risk assessments. They need to translate risks into business terms, such as operational downtime, safety risk, and cost. And the security professional should recommend balanced controls that align with organizational goals. And very important, we discussed this a couple of times this evening, the security professional should engage in continuous improvement cycles. It's not a case of doing your assessment and then walking away and saying, that was a good job I did there. It's continual. It's a continuous improvement cycle. So, oh yes, use the metrics and dashboards to convey residual risks to leadership. Residual risk, remember, is what's left over after you've done your mitigation strategy. There's always something left over that can either be accepted as a risk or some other method. So that is it for, what time is it? 7 o'clock. That's it for domain 1, task 5. Nelson, do you want to see if there's any questions, or do you want to go straight into the practice test?
No, well, I will. If anyone have any question, I think it's a good moment before going into the practice test. I also want, in the meantime, to let me see if I can see the pool and yes. And before I start you should have a pool in the chat. And I would like to get your feedback or your answer to those 6 questions about how we want to move forward with the study group, if you want to continue in the same way, or maybe we can improve a little bit some of the process that we are doing. Do you have can you see the pool in your chat? Anyone?
Yes.
I can't see it in the chat column.
Let me, yeah, because maybe they are, let me see. How do they test in PSP?
Pop in the middle of the screen for me.
It's a good question here. Andy say, how do they test PSP exam with real world example or from actual book content? I think that is with both, but I also realized that some of the questions that I'm putting in at least in the past sections, some of them are easy to answer. And really, I changed my mind, and at this moment, I try to put more challenging questions, because in the test, the problem in the test is that you have a question and and you have 4 answers. Maybe all of them could be good, okay? But one of them, it will be the best. And the best is not only by your opinion, it's really by the book. It's really by the definition of ASIS. In some cases, we have our own opinion about, we have our own acknowledgement about one particular topic, but it's not the right answer for them. for that reason, you need to have a clear understanding of the concept. It's more like it's not that you need to learn the exact wording or the literal way that they describe, but you need to learn the concept. Yeah, some people are responding the pool. The pool should be in the chat section. We have so far 17 responses. Let's start. We will have that in the. Let me share my screen, and we can start with the quiz. And in the meantime, if people want to respond the poll, it will be in the chat. Okay, let's go here. Oops, sorry. We copy also. We copy what I did. Copy. Okay. You have the QR code and you have the link in the chat.
Okay, so the correct answer in this one, of course, is risk equals threat multiplied by vulnerability multiplied by impact. On the original slide I did, it was threat, vulnerability, and consequence. But sometimes, yeah. Yes, but sometimes you have to watch for different wording in the questions in the exam. They may not say exactly, but they're trying to see your knowledge. They're trying to get your knowledge of what risk would be in this case. They may change that word to impact or consequence or something.
Yeah, that is the tricky thing in the test. Exactly. Yeah. That is the wording, the way that they create the question sometimes is confused.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, the second question was, what does DBT stand for according to the PoA? The right one, the right answer is the design basis treat. You can go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the question is, what does a loss event profile describe? And of course, the answer is the frequency and potential consequences of loss events. And that can be gotten from the Protection of Assets, Chapter 3, Section 324, page 34.
Next.
What is the purpose of a risk matrix? The purpose of a risk matrix is to compare the frequency and severity of risk. PoA says risk analysis results are often plotted in a matrix. Question 5, how are threats evaluated? And the answer is B. It considers both intentional and unintentional threats as well as natural threats. And the PoA described it as threats can be divided into several categories, including man-made threats, employees, terrorist organizations, organized crime, and natural threats. Any of those is a threat.
Copy a second set of questions in the chat. We have, I think that it's worth it to discuss some of the questions. For example, in this case, what does residual risk refer? 20% of the people that answer the question say risks that arise before asset valuation. But the correct answer, we will go in the correct answer, but that is risk remaining after control are applied. That is the definition. Let's go there. And we have another question there. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, the way I phrased it was residual risk is the amount of risk that remains after all possible risk mitigation strategies have been implemented, which really are controls. Again, be careful of the wording. You have to understand, the actual concept, and they may use different words on you. So
that is a type of question that you will find in the test. This
yes.
Type of question with this type of wording. And that's the thing that from now on, including with this domain, I prepare, I think that 15 more questions that I can share with you in a little bit more challenging question.
Okay, so why use a cost-benefit analysis? Basically, the CBA compares the mitigation cost with the risk reduction benefit. And the POA says mitigation should be based on cost versus benefit. Question 8, what is the organization's risk tolerance, risk appetite? And that is the level of risk the organization is willing to accept in pursuit of its objectives.
Yeah, that is this definition, risk appetite, is used in the industry, and it's like Alan was telling us, for example, in the retail, they say, okay, I will not spend money on this or this amount of money on this because it doesn't work. Okay, that is the risk appetite for any organization. Maybe it's more expensive to implement a security system that assume the risk.
What does ERM stand for? Enterprise Risk Management. And it gives, the POA gives a description below. So the next one, why rank risks during analysis? And that is to prioritize which threats to mitigate first. You should rank your risks in priority order.
Okay, next set. Here in the chat. Oh, we have, did we receive? There is a question in the chat. Did we receive the answer from domain 1 task 4 quiz? I sent an email, Van. If you don't receive that, let me know. I can forward the email. I sent an email last week with the quiz and the answer from domain 1 task 4. Okay, move on.
Okay, question 11, which example shows mitigation versus elimination? And of course, mitigation reduces the likelihood by using your security controls. Elimination removes the threat completely. Number 12, why is legal compliance key in risk management? And the answer is A, it ensures the organization meets mandatory codes and reduces exposure to legal action, which would include HIPAA, ADA compliance, that sort of thing. What happens if risk is not managed properly? The answer is D. It may lead to legal action or penalties.
Yeah, look at that. That is one of the questions that some people, I think, that was confused. We have like a 49 and 40 something. But if you analyze the question is what happens if risk is not managed properly? It may result in unnecessary sexy spending on redundant security system. Yes, it could be. Okay, but it could be, but it shouldn't be. Okay, you shouldn't spend money on something that is not worthy or something that it will not be good for the organization.
Yeah,
The
those are one of
second one.
those. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this is one of those questions where there's a similarity between the answers, and it really makes you think sometimes. So this is one of the ones maybe in the test you may want to skip and keep to the end if you're not 100% sure, or if you want to think about it some more.
Yeah, that is a good advice.
So question 14, why must risks be monitored continually? And the answer is C, to ensure security policies remain aligned with evolving threat conditions. Remember, we mentioned that this is always an evolving. Threats are evolving. Everything changes over years. Your business might change over years too. And question 15, why is communicating risk results significant? And that would help senior management make informed decisions about security investments. And that probably would be quantitative, I imagine, Nelson.
It seems that with this, we end our section for today. Any questions? Let me see if I can. I don't know if you.
I'm not getting refreshed on the chat, so I can't see what's happening.
No, and I try to unmute. Let me see. I have the chat. I try to unmute everybody, but let me see. And not the best with this thing. Mute, no, cancel. We will mute everybody in this meeting, cancel. I think that people can unmute by themselves if they want to say something. How soon do you get? Okay, we have some question here. Okay, how soon do you suggest we take the test after a study group? Well, it will depend because every person is different. And I will not say that we only the study group, you will pass the test. I think that you need to put a little bit more time studying and basically going in the try to understand the definition that ASIS put in this study group or in the PSP certification. But it will be every person will be different. It's also you have I can share that information. It's in the ASIS website. You have like it's not a test, but it's like a matrix that you can fill out the matrix based on your own knowledge of the topics. And you can say, okay, I feel good with this. I need to put a little bit more time on this order. Okay. It's a public document. Everyone can use that document. Can you remind me how much each domain is weighting in the exam? Okay. Let me. I think that maybe we can do this really quick here.
I think they're all 30-something%, but I don't have the actual
almost
numbers.
30-something%. Every one of them is, and the second domain is the highest point. Let me check here.
Yeah, I thought it was 34, 34, 32.
No,
That sounds
it's,
about-
I think that this 35 at this moment, 35, the second one, 34, and 33 or something like that. But yeah. Let me see. Thank you for all your support. Will you suggest taking domains? Will you suggest taking domains and tasks and comparing to the working in POA wording? Yeah, it will be good practice. You can go to if you have the POA book, it will be good to read that book. All this information that you have here, most of them is from the POA book. I believe you send an email with a discount how to become a member. No, I don't think that. I think that yes. Last month, I don't know if it's still on, but ASIS have. They say that was the certification month, and they put some kind of promotion or say, okay, if you certify at this moment, maybe will be a little bit discount in the test. Is there anywhere that we can get practice tests? No, but yes, I think that online you can try to find some practice tests, but my experience is that those tests are not really good, or they have obsolete information. The thing that I'm doing with this practice quiz, it will be the practice test. Last week, the email that I sent is send the link to the question that we review here in the study group, and you can retake the question by in your own. Okay, you can go in that link and basically take again the question, and the questions also have, let me see how I can move this from here. Give me 1 second to share my screen again really quick. This one. When I share the link, the link in this case, because we are doing online, I'm doing the 5 questions, okay? But the link will have the 15 question like a quiz. You don't need to go 5 and 5. And also, the question will give, the question will provide you hide this button. It will not show up the answer, but you can get the right answer. I also send the link, a document with the correct answer and the documentation where I found that answer not where I find the answer is really any information related to that particular answer. Okay. Let me see if we have any other question. There is a practice test. Okay. In the PSP study guide. Okay, chapter 12. If you have the study guide, Richard say that it's a practice test in the chapter 12. Here is the landing page on certification month. Okay, yes. ASIS has a practice test on their website with about 50 questions. Do you have to pay for it? The practice question that I found was like 4 questions. Probably for the 50 question, you need to pay for that, probably.
Yeah, I found 10 questions for free when I did a search. But
something like
to get
that
anything,
was.
yeah, to get anything more, you're probably gonna have to pay for it. The one thing that worked for me quite well were PSP flashcards that you could buy from ASIS, I think for like $100. and they're quite good. Or you can create your own using PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, well, this is another thing, basically because I enjoying to do this. I was thinking to create some kind of flashcard and put in my LinkedIn page. Basically, if you follow me, you will find information every week about that. I haven't started, but it's something that I was thinking to do. Okay, it's 6:32. We don't have any more questions. The PSP study guide third edition have 30 practical questions. Okay. Good to know.
I have to look through my hard drive. I may have a couple of tests. If I find them, I'll forward them to you, Nelson. Maybe you can have a look too.
Thank you, everyone. Well, thank you for being here this week. And yes, let's see. I think that the flashcards are more difficult than some other tests. Yeah, I had a flashcard for PSP, and yes, the flashcards are tricky. It's not really question; it's definition in the flashcard. Okay, thank you. Have a good night, and see you next week.
Okay, see you guys.